Let's have breakfast for dinner. Hello shepherds, welcome back, and if you're new here, hello. This is where we talk all things sheepy. My name is Megan, and today I thought what better way to bring your coffee shop favorites to home than with pastries. I've seen variations of these pastries online, but they're pretty hard to find locally. So for today's dinner, I thought we could sheepify the Streusel. And since I'm pronouncing that horribly, from now on I'm referring it to just as a pastry. But would it be really wrong to call it a Danish? Let me know. So one of the reasons I love this recipe is that instead of a traditional puff pastry, which is pretty labor intensive, this is more like a yeasty sweetbread. It adapts well to sweet and savory fillings, jams, and berries, fresh or frozen. So let's get started. First off, we're going to make our streusel topping and set it aside. I'm making a northeastern version of the topping, so we'll need butter, softened at room temperature. I'm using our sheep's butter and weighing it out to around 42 grams or around 3 tablespoons. If you need to soften your butter in a jiffy, so to speak, it helps to nuke it in the microwave for about 10 seconds. This sheep's butter's been sitting out for a bit, so it'll be fine. We'll also need around 1/4 of a cup or 23 grams of rolled oats. Old-fashioned style is best, really. And then half a cup or 60 grams of unbleached all-purpose flour. In our bowl, we're going to add another 1/3 of a cup or 71 grams of brown sugar if you have some. I don't really have brown sugar, so instead I like to use granulated sugar and add some blackstrap molasses back into the mix to make a homemade type of brown sugar. Usually 1 to 2 tablespoons is good enough to give a little bit of that molasses flavor and color. Then we mix it all together until it's crumbly. I tend to make my toppings a bit dry, so to see if I've added enough butter, I'm doing a squeeze test. If I squeeze it in my hand and it holds its shape well, it has a good amount of butter. If I didn't have enough butter in there, it would fall apart like sand. So now that our streusel topping is ready, I'm going to set it aside. And since we have a lot of black currants from earlier that I froze, I thought it'd be fun to pull some out of the freezer and use those as a topping as well. You can use berries either fresh or frozen. It does help to thaw and strain these berries prior to topping though. I'm going to cook my berries a little bit, and mainly I'm looking to burst our currants and concentrate those flavors a bit. You can add sugar if you want to this, as well as spices, but I really enjoy the tartness of these currants, so I'm leaving them without any sugar. Once they're done, I'm going to set these currants aside and then work on our dough. In a larger bowl, we're going to combine around 3 cups or 394 grams of flour. And then I'm going to add more flour as needed if it's not stiff enough, because we're looking for a really stiff dough. We'll also need about 73 grams or 1/3 of a cup of sugar. I like to make a well in the center of the flour with the mixer and then toss in our largest egg into the mix. Next up, we need to warm up our milk, and sometimes it's good for recipes to scald the milk to around 180 degrees Fahrenheit or 82 degrees Celsius for baking, and this is because there are some qualities of fresh milk that may cause problems with the bread rising. And when making milk breads, it really helps with adding moisture and improving the crumb texture. Though I'm not going to be concerned with that for this recipe. So what I'm doing is I'm just heating the milk to body temperature warm, enough to activate the yeast and get this dough ready to wake up. So let's add our warmed milk to the bowl and a pinch of salt. We're going to mix everything together. Also, disclaimer, I'm using my solids measuring cup for milking liquids. If you're using liquid measuring cups, which is more accurate technically, you'll end up with more moisture in your dough. The difference between my own solid 2/3 a cup is 149 grams of milk versus the liquid measuring cup, which is actually around, from what I measured, 164 grams of milk for comparison. So if you're using liquid measurements, which is actually the proper way to do it, you may need to add more flour. Also, depending on how you measure your flour and your liquids, there's going to be some adjustments there. So just bear that in mind when you're mixing up your dough. Right now, it's pretty sticky, so I'm going to dust a little bit of flour at a time and seeing how it pulls away. I'm looking for a smooth dough that's easy to handle. So after mixing it for a few more minutes, now we have our dough ready. And let's put a dish on top of our bowl and then set aside to rest for an hour or until doubled. I actually need to get going to pick up my youngest from their club real quick, so I'm gonna have to rest this some more in our fridge to slow down the proofing, but also that deepens the flavor. Okay, so now I'm back and I'm gonna divide this dough into 12 equal-ish pieces. Each ball is about the size of a cutie mandarin orange, or ranging from 55 to 60 grams each ball. Next, I'm rolling these guys out. Not too thin, but if you prefer a puff pastry that's a little thicker, roll thicker. I am lightly flouring the surface as needed to prevent our dough from sticking to our canvas cloth. And once we're done rolling out our dough, I'm going to set each pastry disc out on our baking sheet and then cover them with a towel to rise for about 15 to 20 minutes. And now for the fun part. Let's decorate our dough and pop them into the oven. But first, let's heat up our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 177 degrees Celsius. I wanted a couple of varieties for our dinner. Since raspberry season is in full swing, I thought it would be fun to add a few berries to some of our pastries. Just a few here or there, and then a nice sprinkling of our streusel topping we made earlier. So then off to the oven. Really, it's more to taste. I'm just looking to cover the streusel on top of our dough. Generally, I want it pretty well evenly coated, but if you prefer less, go ahead and do less. Now that they look like they're about ready to eat, it's time to go pop them off in the oven. I want them to bake for about 15 to 20 minutes or until golden brown. So let's get to the other tray while this one's baking. I'm adding about 2 spoonfuls to each one and spreading the juice around too. I just love the color. And because our currants have been cooked, it won't add too much moisture to our dough and keeping our dough nice and fluffy. If you have jam on hand, I think that would work really well too. I've seen varieties of this pastry with various cheeses, from mascarpone, mozzarella, and then with various jams as well. And I imagine jellies as well too would work. So let's go ahead and pop these guys in the oven to bake, and just like with the raspberry pastries, we want them to be golden brown and about 15-20 minutes on average. So now that our raspberry pastry looks like it's pretty ready, let's go ahead and pull that one out and set them aside to cool. And let the black currant pastry bake a little bit more before we pull that one out. After a few more minutes, our currant pastry is ready to pull out of the oven, and let's set them aside as well to cool. I'm transferring them to a wire rack. I'm kind of lazy, so I'm using my fingers to move them. But if you want to use a spatula or something to handle them, they are pretty hot. So now that they're cooling on the rack, let's go ahead and make our glaze. I usually freehand the glaze, so it's about a heaping handful of powdered sugar or confectioner's sugar, and I'm slowly adding our flax milk into the sugar and stirring till smooth. If you want to use lemon or berry juice, that works really well too. I'm also adding a dash of vanilla and stirring it in together well. I want it to be semi-thick for a nice drizzle. So to test that, I want a slight resistance to the glaze when I drizzle it back in. Kind of similar to making a custard if you're familiar with that. So let's glaze our pastries and then sample the goods. I'm trying to go for more of a drizzle than globs, and then as it dries, it'll harden. The glaze should be thick but still flowing. So if you find your glaze too thick, add more liquid. And if you find your glaze too thin, add more of the confectioner's sugar back in. This will help firm up your glaze, and then you can fine tune it to whatever you really need. So now that we're done glazing our pastries, let's sample. I'm going to start with our black currant pastry. The brightness and tartness of the currants are the first thing that pops out, followed by the sweetness of the glaze. I love the combination of texture in each bite. There's the softness from the dough and the crunch from the streusel topping. The raspberry pastry, by comparison, is far more sweet. The first flavor to come to the front is the glaze, combined with the topping, and then the raspberry lightly follows through. It's soft and light and also really filling. When using milk and butter in these products, it's kind of funny because I noticed for myself at least, I can't say, this was made with sheep's milk, or there's notes of grass-fed, wool-based milks. But if I sub another liquid in, I definitely notice the lack of a complex flavor or depth. What about you? I have noticed a difference in some recipes and behavior with some milk types, but this isn't one of them. Do you have a favorite milk type or butter to bake with? Let me know in the comments. Also, depending on humidity levels or weather, these are best stored in an airtight container for a day or so at room temperature, or for several days in the fridge. To store longer, it really helps to wrap them well and then freeze. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a sheepy take. And if you made it this far, an extra special thank you. I appreciate you. And I'll see you in the next one. Ta-tas!